October 1860, Beijing. The Summer Palace, 800 acres of the most beautiful gardens, temples, and art collections in Asia. Centuries of Chinese civilization, all in one place. And it's on fire. 3,500 British soldiers spent 3 days burning it to the ground. Lord Elgin, the British commander, wrote in his own letters that he wanted the destruction to be so complete, so humiliating, that China would never forget. He got his wish. But here's what Elgin didn't understand. Here's what your history books never explained. That fire didn't just destroy a palace, it lit something else. A flame that's still burning 165 years later. Because China didn't forget. They weren't supposed to. And they used that memory, that humiliation, as fuel. This wasn't an accident. This was transformation. You've watched the result with your own eyes. When you were young, China was poor, isolated, the sick man of Asia. Now, World Bank data shows it's the world's second largest economy, manufacturing powerhouse, military superpower. That rise wasn't luck. It wasn't even economics. It was revenge. Calculated, generational, deliberate. The Opium Wars were meant to keep China weak forever. They failed, and you're about to learn why the deepest wounds sometimes create the strongest nations. Let's go back to where it started, because the details matter. 1839, Britain had a problem. The British were obsessed with Chinese tea, couldn't get enough of it. But China didn't want anything Britain made. Silver was flowing out of Britain and into China at a rate of $20 to $34 million annually. Contemporary British records document this. The trade deficit was killing them. So British merchants came up with a solution that was brilliant and evil in equal measure. They'd grow opium in India, smuggle it into China, create millions of addicts, and use drug profits to pay for tea. And it worked. Perfectly. By the late 1830s, estimates range from 4 to 12 million Chinese opium addicts. British parliamentary records documented this themselves. That's not Chinese propaganda. That's the perpetrators' own paperwork. Even the conservative estimate of 4 million is staggering. We're talking about fathers who couldn't work, mothers who couldn't care for children, entire communities hollowed out by addiction. When China tried to stop it, when a Chinese official named Lin Zexu seized and destroyed 20,000 chests of British opium, Britain declared war. Let that sink in. Britain went to war to protect its right to sell drugs. The First Opium War lasted 3 years. China lost. Badly. And the Treaty of Nanking in 1842, still preserved in British archives, forced China to pay massive indemnities, open 5 ports to British trade, and hand over Hong Kong. Hong Kong. Taken as payment for a drug war Britain started. But it got worse. The Second Opium War came in 1856. Britain wanted more, always more. This time, France joined in, and this time they marched on Beijing itself. That's when they reached the Summer Palace. The looting came first. Soldiers grabbed anything valuable: jade, silk, gold, porcelain, paintings. Western missionaries who witnessed it wrote about troops fighting each other over treasures. Then came the burning. 3 days, 800 acres, gone. Lord Elgin ordered the destruction specifically to humiliate the emperor. His own letters say so. He wanted the pain to be personal, unforgettable. Mission accomplished. The treaties that followed were even worse. More ports opened, more territory carved away, foreign soldiers stationed on Chinese soil. extraterritoriality, meaning foreigners couldn't be tried under Chinese law, even for crimes against Chinese people. China wasn't just defeated, it was dismembered, humiliated, violated. And it wasn't over. 1900, the Boxer Rebellion. Chinese peasants rose up against foreign domination. 8 nations, Britain, France, America, Germany, Russia, Japan, Italy, Austria-Hungary, formed an alliance and invaded. 8 of the world's most powerful nations against 1. 50,000 foreign troops occupied Beijing. The Boxer Protocol of 1901 demanded 450 million taels in silver, roughly $333 million at the time. That's over 1,300% of China's annual tax revenue. The indemnity was designed not just to punish, but to cripple, to keep China weak for generations. And the Western powers? They carved up the country into spheres of influence. Railway rights here, mining rights there. Port cities turned into foreign enclaves, where Chinese people were second-class citizens in their own country. 110 years. From the First Opium War in 1839 to Mao's declaration of the People's Republic in 1949, that's how long the humiliation lasted. If you grew up during the Cold War, you were taught Communist China was the enemy, the Red Menace. But here's what they didn't teach you. America was part of that 8-nation invasion force. We helped occupy Beijing. We're in China's memory too. Here's the thing. Most nations that suffer this kind of trauma either collapse or just fade. They become footnotes. China didn't. Something different happened. The humiliation created 3 things that changed everything. First, a national awakening. Before the Opium Wars, there wasn't really a Chinese national identity in the modern sense. There was the emperor. There were subjects. But ordinary people didn't think of themselves as part of a nation the way Europeans did. The invasions changed that. Suddenly, being Chinese meant something. It meant being the victim of foreign aggression. It meant shared suffering, shared shame, shared determination. Second, the never again resolve. Every Chinese leader since 1949, Mao, Deng, Xi, has grounded their legitimacy in one promise: we will never let this happen again. Never again will foreign powers dictate to China. Never again will Chinese people be second-class citizens. Never again will China be weak. That's not rhetoric. That's national religion. Third, modernization urgency. China didn't lose the Opium Wars because Chinese people were inferior. They lost because Britain had industrial technology and China didn't. Steam-powered warships against wooden junks. Modern artillery against outdated cannons. The lesson was clear. Modernize or die. These 3 forces, national identity, never again determination, modernization urgency, became the fuel. The transformation fuel. And China has been burning it ever since. Now, here's what Western analysts consistently miss. They look at China's military buildup, its economic policies, its assertiveness, and they think it's about the present, about competition, about power. They're wrong. It's about 1860. It's about 1900. It's about 110 years of humiliation that every Chinese person learns about before they learn algebra. The memory was preserved deliberately, intentionally, systematically. Chinese schools teach the Century of Humiliation as core curriculum, not as ancient history, as recent trauma, as the wound that made modern China necessary. Every child learns about the Opium Wars. Every child sees images of the Summer Palace burning, Every child understands. This is what happens when China is weak. Museums across China document the period in exhaustive detail. The treaties, the invasions, the atrocities. These aren't dusty archives, they're pilgrimage sites. School groups visit constantly, and the message is always the same. Remember, never forget, never again. This isn't brainwashing, or rather, it's not false. The events happened. Western archives confirm every major claim. The difference is emphasis. Western education minimizes this period. Chinese education centers it. When you watched Nixon shake hands with Mao in 1972, what were you told? That America was bringing China into the modern world? Opening up China? But here's what Chinese leaders saw. America needs us now. The balance is shifting. We're on our way back. They were taking notes, recording everything, planning. Watch how this works in practice. Every major Chinese policy goal traces back to never again. Military buildup? Never again will foreign warships sail up Chinese rivers unchallenged. China now has the world's largest navy by ship count, not because they want war, because they remember what happened when they were weak. Economic development? Never again will China be technologically inferior. World Bank data, not Chinese government claims, shows China lifted 800 million people out of poverty between 1981 and 2015. That's more than double the entire US population in your lifetime. From the Cold War to now, that wasn't charity, that was strategy. A strong economy means a strong military, means no more humiliation. Technology self-sufficiency? This is where it gets really clear. Made in China 2025, you've probably heard of it. Western analysts call it an aggressive industrial policy, a threat. But read the actual documents. The goal is self-sufficiency in semiconductors, aerospace, robotics. Why? Because China learned what happens when you depend on foreign technology. They cut you off. They control you. The 1990s taught this lesson again. When China tried to buy advanced technology, Western nations blocked the sales. When Chinese diplomats were accidentally killed in the Belgrade embassy bombing in 1999, Chinese leaders saw a message. You're still vulnerable. You still depend on us. Never again. So they built their own GPS system, Beidou, their own space station, because they were excluded from the International Space Station. Their own high-speed rail network, from 0 kilometers in 2008 to over 40,000 by 2023. World's largest network, built in 15 years, from nothing. That's not normal economic development. That's obsession. That's fuel burning. Look at how Chinese leaders talk. Really listen. Xi Jinping calls it the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Rejuvenation, not creation, not building something new, restoring something lost, returning to greatness that was stolen. Every speech about Chinese achievement references the Century of Humiliation. Every military parade, every space launch, every economic milestone. The message? Look how far we've come. Remember where we were. Never go back. When you watched the Beijing Olympics opening ceremony in 2008, that moment with 2008 drummers in perfect sync, that wasn't just spectacle. That was a statement. We're not the sick man of Asia anymore. We are powerful, coordinated, disciplined, and were not hiding it. The wound became the engine. Now, is this unique? Does national humiliation always create transformation? No. Sometimes it creates destruction instead. Germany after World War I. The Treaty of Versailles humiliated Germany, took territory, imposed crippling reparations, blamed them for the entire war. The wound festered, and it produced Hitler, Nazism, World War II, the Holocaust. That's what happens when humiliation turns to pure revenge, without strategic patience. Japan, after Commodore Perry forced it open in 1853, is a different story. Japan was humiliated by Western technological superiority, but instead of seeking revenge through war, at first, Japan modernized with terrifying speed. The Meiji Restoration transformed a feudal society into an industrial power in decades. China studied both examples. They learned humiliation can be fuel for modernization or destruction. The difference is strategy, patience, long-term thinking. China chose the marathon, not the sprint. Deng Xiaoping's famous instruction in the 1990s: hide your strength, bide your time. Don't provoke the West while you're still weak. Build quietly, grow steadily, wait. They waited. For decades, Western leaders thought China was becoming more like us. Trade was supposed to bring democracy. Remember? The promises when China joined the WTO in 2001. How'd that work out? China got the trade, kept the Communist Party, built the world's second largest economy, and now they're not hiding anymore. You've watched this entire transformation with your own eyes. Nixon's handshake, Tiananmen, Hong Kong's return, the Beijing Olympics. From rice paddies to skyscrapers, from bicycle nation to high-speed rail empire. In your lifetime, China went from a country where millions starved to a country that manufactures nearly 30% of everything on Earth. UN data confirms this. That's more than the US, Japan, and Germany combined. And the fuel for all of it. A palace burning in 1860. Treaties signed at gunpoint. 8 nations occupying Beijing. 110 years of humiliation, preserved in national memory and converted into national determination. So here's what your government won't say. The Opium Wars didn't just humiliate China. They created modern China. Every military base China builds, every factory, every satellite, every aircraft carrier, fueled by one memory: never again. Britain thought they were creating a permanent victim, a market to exploit forever, a nation too broken to resist. They were wrong. The humiliation didn't break China. It forged something harder. That's the paradox. Sometimes the deepest wounds create the strongest determination. Sometimes the nations that suffer most transform most completely. Sometimes burning a palace lights a fire that burns for centuries. The world your grandchildren inherit will be shaped by what happened in the 1800s. Not by what we did, by how China remembered it and used it. That's the story Western education never taught you. Now you know why.